The Unreal Fellowship was an actually really interesting and unique experience. There were so many people from all over the visual effects industry, everywhere from pre-production to post-production. It was a great experience to bring everybody together to be in an environment where we could all learn and all move forward into what the capabilities of the Unreal Engine could do.
Using Unreal opened up my eyes to a better way of doing specific tasks in virtual production and in general visual effects work, which is something that I didn't think was going to be possible.
The term virtual production is an odd one because it means something different to everybody in this business. I always just called it, no, it's just production. It's just we're doing production virtually. And that means all manners of production.
10 years ago, and even for that matter, 5 years ago, virtual production was considered sort of this outlying group that typically was associated with blockbuster effects movies. I think those days are over. You're going to see virtual production become a standard department in the production paradigm. You'll see directors and DPs and production designers starting to use it just as much as visual effects. They'll have a virtual production department now at their disposal to help them figure out how to undertake their work.
Also, with Unreal being an open and free engine, it's allowing everybody from all walks of life to be able to dive into it.
Unreal being relatively new to the visual effects community, we desperately need more people that know it. Right now, you could probably do 2 good-sized films, and you'd start picking up the phone and like, well, who do we call?
The gap right now is where facilities are at in terms of their infrastructure, because we know the needs of the productions, but now the actual facilities need to match their capabilities with the needs.
In the long run, as I look at it, virtual production and Unreal Engine are the future. Looking at Unreal 5, it opens up so much more potential and so much more for us to be able to create.
I think it's very important to understand virtual production in today's filmmaking climate. One, we can see how COVID has impacted production, and to be able to see how you can use Unreal to do remote production and multi-user collaboration, it allows you a new set of tools to keep creating.
I don't see us going off for extended location shoots anymore. The ability to recreate these environments virtually and navigate through them quite easily in Unreal is very promising, and I think it will be a tool that will be heavily exploited going forward.
There's always been a challenge of money. How do we do things faster, cheaper? The concept of real-time rendering and getting seconds of frame is mind-blowing. It just means that companies would need much less infrastructure to be able to do it than in the old days, and also faster iteratively, which is super important.
There's a natural tendency to be afraid of new technologies, and I think through measured exposure of Unreal and what the opportunities it presents to the different departments, I think adoption will be very quick over the coming years. And I intend to bring it forward with productions that I'm looking at doing right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday live stream. Today we have a live stream called the Unreal Fellowship Curriculum Deep Dive, and we are welcoming our very special guest, Brian Poole, to the stream, who is the curriculum director for the Virtual Production Fellowship.
Thanks,
Welcome,
Louis.
Brian.
Hey,
Brian.
thanks, Louis. Tom, good to see you both.
And as usual, we welcome Tom Shannon to the stream, our co-host. And he is joining us from Colorado, sunny Colorado. It looks nice and sunny today, crisp and brisk in Colorado. And today we are missing our good friend, Mark Flanagan, who typically joins us from the United Kingdom, though he's a little under the weather today. He's doing well. He's fine. He just didn't sleep well last night or something, so he's taken the evening to relax and watch the stream from home. So, Mark, we hope you feel better today.
Feel better, Mark.
But yeah, we have an exciting stream today. I think that hopefully you got a little insight for those of you who are not familiar with the Unreal Fellowship. It's a program that's been running, I guess it ran all last year. And we're going to learn, I think, a lot more about it. I think it's something that's been getting a lot of really interesting buzz. virtual production, for those of you who are not familiar with it, we're going to dig into it a little bit more. Brian's going to tell us a lot more about it. It's something that's really exciting. I think it's really revolutionizing the way that people think about film, television, media production in general, and Unreal Engine is really in the forefront of virtual production. And I think that there's a lot of visual effects professionals out there who are very interested in this particular field and interested in understanding how to jump into Unreal, and how to change their workflows. And Brian, I don't want to talk about this. This is your field. So, tell us a little bit, first of all, before we really get into the curriculum and what the fellowship is all about. Tell us a little bit about yourself and
Sure.
just give us a little bit of background about what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, no problem. So I've worked in visual effects and animation for years. My background is primarily live action production as a previous supervisor. And I probably did that for about 17, 18 years. I had my own company for a while, but I went up through the ranks. I, became a previs artist first, working at Lucasfilm, doing previs on, the prequels for me, it was episode 2, Attack of the Clones. But from there, I transferred out and went over to ILM for several years, worked in their previs department for a while. And when they, reconsolidated, the company and put it over there, can't remember the name of it. When they reconsolidated into a single company, it was kind of like, okay, we need to do some restructuring. So I left ILM at that time, came down to LA and started working for Digital Domain for a while. And, did some previs as previs supervisor on iRobot and on Stealth and a few other projects. And then after that, moved over to ImageWorks, did some animated production for a while on Open Season and a few others, and then started my own previs company, which was Persistence of Vision. And POV Previs, we worked on all kinds of films, doing previs for them. And that was when previs was really quite new. And it was when a lot of people were like, hey, previs, you're taking our jobs by doing this. It's very interesting how people reacted to previs. They were not really very excited about it. But there were some people who were very interested in it. Lucas being one of them is the primary spearhead for that kind of workflow. But ultimately, previs now is kind of caught on. It's definitely a household name word thing that still captures a lot of people's attention when you say, hey, we're going to do previs for this film. It's kind of expected now. And so previs back in the day was very much trying to exploit as close to real-time technology as we could. And of course we were trying to do that in OpenGL and working in the viewports of a lot of regular DCC applications. And it was never fun to try and get as much performance out of those viewports as we could and still look good. And so it was always a mixed bag as to how it would be received and how people would look at the previs and go, oh wow, that's helpful, or no, it it isn't. But after that, it was I worked at Autodesk for about 3 years as a UX designer, and then back to previs for a little bit more, and then I joined Epic, and I've been at Epic for about 3.5 years now, roughly.
Awesome. And so give us a little bit of background on virtual production and how what the fellowship was and how this all came about, because I think this is another really exciting thing that has generated a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and buzz for Unreal Engine. And I'll never forget being at we did what it was, GTC or SIGGRAPH, where we were at the theater and Jon Favreau shows up on the stage and starts talking about The Mandalorian, of course, and all of a sudden the huge enthusiasm and buzz starts, and everyone in the audience just goes crazy for how films and television and everything's going to happen in the future. But, I don't want to tell this story. This is a great story for you to jump into.
Well, you're definitely right. It's very interesting. The first time I saw The Mandalorian stage, I was kind of like in shock. Because it was in a full-size soundstage, and the soundstage door was open, and I had parked my car in the parking lot, way far away, and I'm walking towards the stadium or to the stage, and I can see through the open stage door this incredible looking set. It was basically Mos Eisley and a lot of the area for The Mandalorian and where it takes place. And I'm like walking towards the set. And I'm like, God, this is a huge set, and I can't. It looks so good. And then I walked through the doors, and I'm like, wait a minute. There's something different about this. And of course, it was this giant LED wall that was projecting all of this. And I was like amazed, just, the combination of course, of the LED wall in combination with, actual foreground and midground practical set pieces and the actors being in place. It was very, very convincing, incredible to look at. And it was like, okay, yeah, this is going to change everything as far as our approach to production. But if you back up just a little bit and look at film production as a whole, all we're essentially doing is we're kind of going back to the golden age of film production, where there was basically everything was shot in camera. When you go back to the 20s and so, and when film production was really in its golden age, 20 through 40s, 1940s.
Voyage to the Moon, right? Like they did it back then. They basically had plates in the background, and they were filming through glass. And this is the oldest technique in the book, but they did it very practically back then.
Oh yeah, everything. Both, not only all of that potential, but all of the lighting, everything else, actors, everything was in camera,
right?
And taken account for. And of course, as technology was introduced in the film production process, a lot of these elements that they were shooting in camera, of course, started to be separated and pulled out, and new technology to make that better. And this progressed quite effectively, and kind of reached its pinnacle, of course, when CGI was introduced into the whole production pipeline, and when Jurassic Park kind of hit the screen. That was kind of like the tipping point in which people could kind of say, oh wow, before that they were thinking about using Go Motion for those dinosaurs, and Phil Tippett's crew, to produce that and animate that. But along comes ILM, and I think it was John Knoll who made a request to go in and say, hey, let's consider CGI for these dinosaurs, and produced some animated tests that was like, that kind of was like, all right, yeah, this can be very convincing, excellent animation. But what that did was it started what we call the beginning of the black box process of visual effects, where it was like, let's go ahead and put something into this black box, and hopefully we'll see a result out of it in 6 to 9 months of work. And it left the director kind of a little bit dazed as to how that whole process took place. How does he influence it? And you can actually see in the early days of CGI, you can see a completely different aesthetic from what was shot as the film and what was shot as the CGI. And it was very much like, okay,
right,
two totally different styles here. But ultimately, folks like Lucas, he knew this black box existed. So it was kind of like, how can I leverage this more effectively? And this is where you see the whole advent of the whole previs generation of visual effects, and creating previs for VFX. And he needed somebody to do this, and the cinematographers, of course, their whole job and position, of course, is photographing the elements on stage. And unfortunately, it was not a technology that they were very familiar with, but the VFX people were familiar with. So he built these previous teams out of VFX artists and so forth, who unfortunately at the time were not very well versed in cinematography and that profession. So I can tell you truthfully, early days of Previs was a bit clumsy. And it didn't win any fans in the cinematography circle for a long time. But, over time, we've kind of shown as an industry that, we are here to help these disciplines in film production, whether it's cinematography or visual effects and so forth. And the whole Previs thing kind of got integrated into production, but it was still sorely limited by, there was very little to no true real-time technology that was available for Previs. It all had to be play blasted or rendered, and you could make a request for a shot from the director to say, I want to see these revisions, and it could take potentially a few hours or days to see the results. And while that was considerably faster than anything else at the time, it still was by today's standards considered slow.
Right.
So enter Unreal Engine and game engine technology, and that's what was even cooler is there was a number of companies that started using game engines really early on. Back in they actually tried to leverage CryEngine a lot. Cinebox, and it was a good attempt, but there was a number of actual productions that used Cinebox for Previs, but they never actually were able to take it to any sort of final level by any means. And so when Unreal kind of grabbed that ball of, okay, we're going to run with this and start making Unreal Engine more visual effects friendly and capable of being integrated into the pipeline, it started a whole new wave of all of this. And now all of a sudden the director, that whole black box approach exists still, but now it's friendly. And it now has the chance to let the director interact with it in real time and make changes and do things that he doesn't have to wait anymore. And putting a cap on all of this now is that if we take this technology and we move it out onto the stage back into production for virtual production, we can now supply all of these visual effects, various set pieces and elements all on an LED wall, and provide the chance to shoot back in camera again. So you have the interaction of the director and the cinematographer and the rest of the stage personnel, and it becomes more cohesive again, and it becomes something that isn't fragmented. And Jon Favreau, of course, is one of the first to leverage all of this, and it just it is a really, really exciting technology.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really appreciated is in the Mandalorian showcases, where I think it was one of the ILM producers says that it's one of the opportunities where all the key creatives get to actually chime in during principal photography to see it all come together, as opposed to having during principal photography, you get the director, and of course you get the cinematographer, but then you don't really get to see, there's no interactivity with the backgrounds in the environment. So the actors are acting, the green screen, they don't have a context of what's happening in the world, and so, you have some elements of the final film there, but the key creatives are not all together in the same world, understanding the context of what's happening. And so, I think that during something like The Mandalorian, where they're standing in front of a 40-foot tall LED screen that's 70 feet in a circumference, and they're in the world getting to act in context to whether it's a planet or some weird world that they're inhabiting, the people doing the lighting, the people in the environment, the people acting against each other, including even potentially audio, all have the same key creative vision of what is being delivered, even potentially at a final pixel, which is an amazing revolution in telling story, right? Which is what it's all about.
Yeah. And that's That brings me, we really should define what Previs is and how it was utilized and why virtual production is kind of like the evolution of Previs in some sense. And it also is contributing to, producing final in-camera visual effects that can be actually used in your final production. So when you deal with Previs, like I said, when we were back in the day and we had slower computers and we had, these fragmented processes, you needed to have some way to help plan for how to shoot a visual effects film. And the whole avenue of using computer graphics to tell you how to do your production is not necessarily new, but it was, let's use computer graphics to help define the whole process of how we should best shoot and tell our story. And it kind of acts as a planning process. It acts as an ability to flesh out the story, from a conceptual point of view, and ask and define technical questions. So you can determine, where should I have my camera in this particular scene? Will this camera intersect or run into different set pieces or walls if I use this particular lens? How can I best move this camera movement to capture the best angles and so forth? And so, Previs is a process. If you've got skilled Previs artists, you can, they can tell you this. They can say, yes, you can capture that shot. You can make these motions. And this is where, in the early days of Previs, this was, kind of volatile, because it really made it feel like, hey, you have these visual effects artists coming in and doing the job of this cinematographer in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
They were really kind of threatened by that, and rightfully so. Nobody likes to think that their job is being taken away from them, but it was more of a no. We want to be able to help you so that you don't make mistakes during production, because if you go and you've got, you're shooting shots that could potentially be, 5, 6, 7 figures, to get done, you really don't want to make a mistake.
Sure.
And so Previs kind of helps you with that process so that you don't. And whether it's a conceptual planning as to how the story flow should go for the sequence, which is very good for the director to get some idea, and the editor to get some idea of how that sequence plays out. But it's also good for the technicians, the cinematographers, and the people that are, need specific technical data in order to make a shot, correct on the first round. So what Unreal now brings us is the whole fact that it can be real time, it can be iterative, and it can be, in a level of quality that has never been available before for Previs. Previs got, some decent level looks, but it definitely was, not nearly as, gorgeous as what something, Unreal Engine can produce.
Mm-hmm.
So now, you can have production designers come in, you can have cinematographers come in, have the director come in and all see everything within inside of the engine. And you can manipulate things in real time. Say, hey, let's try this lighting setup or this scenario and see how it looks. And lighting was not something that you could do very well in traditional Previs. Lots of limitations unless you rendered something, and it could take a long time. So bringing all of this back to stage now is what's reunifying all of these processes. And it's like, it gives more freedom to the creatives, that they no longer have to wait. And that's a blessing and a curse for us, the technicians who are putting all this together. But, it then, gives them more chances to change things, which, like I said, is a blessing or a curse.
Sure.
Depending upon how you look at it. But
Tom, did you have something you wanted to chime in with? But you'd have to unmute, though.
Oh no, I'm the guy on the meeting with the mute button on. Brian answered my question. I was just gonna kind of bring it back to ask, what is all of this? Because this isn't my background, and I know a lot of these terms because I work at Epic, and it's become something that I'm super interested in, and I've spent a lot of time learning about. But I think for a lot of people, the whole movie production pipeline is a bit of a mystery in general.
Yeah. Well,
so
I mean,
just I wanted to make sure that everyone that was joining us that maybe came from a games background or as a student, really understood what previs meant, because I think just in general, even virtual production tends to be a very broad term.
It's a spectrum for sure.
Yeah.
It's not just one thing, but if you were to really try to put a pin onto what virtual production is, it's the hybridization, or it's the fusion of virtual and practical technologies so that you can, interface with both simultaneously. So, when we deal and talk about virtual production, a lot of people normally think of, either VR or, potentially some sort of LED wall like the Mandalorian, which is, it's a pretty good cue, for that. And that's kind of what it is. But it can be much more than that. And it can, it depends upon who's using the tech. And what phase of film production they're in. But it's not just for film production, it's also applicable for broadcast. You can see a lot of these tools and techniques for creating virtual production can be applied in any media and entertainment based industry, whether it's games, whether it's broadcast, film production, or whatever.
Would you consider also live events? This all kind of falls under the same kind of umbrella that it all kind of spawned from film and previs, but it's pretty much anywhere now that you're kind of, like you said, on stage with this technology. We see it everywhere. And we talk to educators in schools and of all kinds, and I feel like for pretty much any media program, if you've got a camera in your school that's pointing at a stage, at this point it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like virtual production has reached this point where it's an inescapable truth, like previs was. Previs was kind of a thing, and some people were using it, and articles were written in VFX magazines about previs, and now it's you of course are doing it if you've got any sort of effect shots or anything complicated. You're of course going to do that. Do you feel like virtual production has become this indispensable tool like that at this point?
Not quite yet, but it will be. Right now, it's still in the Jon Favreau stage where, it's considered to be like, well, yeah, the people that have millions of dollars can do this. But the reality is that we're right at the beginning of the democratization process of getting this technology out to everybody. And, the whole, you had a green screen in the past, that's going to be replaced with an LED wall, in the future. Mm-hmm. And you can now get virtual production solutions, on the cheap. If you only have a certain budget, you can do all kinds of different things now that bring these technologies together, and it's affordable. And there's lots of off the shelf solutions for it. What doesn't exist yet, and what we're working on, of course, is the whole education process, so that people know how to put this stuff together, and how it all works. Because there's lots of ways to trip up and make mistakes and spend lots of money on really cool toys, but they don't work together with one another. And so you need to really have a solid understanding of the pipeline, the workflow, what hardware you need to use, and so forth. And one of the things for the fellowship is that's what we're planning on trying to teach, which kind of brings me to the fellowship itself, we have we have different ideas or phases of how we want to present the fellowship to people. And so right now we've defined 3 basic phases of the fellowship. There's a phase 1 fellowship, which we've currently been offering, which focuses primarily on Unreal fundamentals, linear content creation and animation. It's that foundational stuff that you need to know in order to really use the engine for creating content. Phase 2 is going to be more of a live action integration. That's where we step up and we start using more of the technologies that you need to have hands-on with, actual cameras, LED walls, mocap suits, all that kind of thing. That's what we want to teach in phase 2. And then phase 3 is what we want to do is collaborative filmmaking. And that's basically, selecting and bringing certain people together to do a role-based collaborative film as a project, for the fellowship. And that would hopefully potentially be, a way for us to produce a really nice, high quality short. Not that what, the folks in V1 haven't produced is in high quality, definitely is, but these are more just kind of proof of concepts for people learning about the engine and getting their feet wet. But it really doesn't, go to that nth level of bringing in, live action and all that other kind of thing, which we are eventually going to get to.
Well, if we take one step back and,
Sure.
talk a little bit about, after we, did SIGGRAPH and we discovered about The Mandalorian, and there was sort of an explosion of interest on virtual production. You were working in the Los Angeles office and having lots and lots of client meetings. The demand for virtual production, skilled people in Unreal Engine just exploded, right? So, let's talk just before we get into the curriculum about kind of what the need for the fellowship, what really sprung the need for it, right? So there all of a sudden became this enormous demand for people trained in Unreal Engine that could meet the demand. And we heard that from all the major companies out in the West Coast, right? From the previs companies to Netflix to Amazon Studios to, can you talk a little bit about what brought the demand for having trained people in Unreal Engine that could hit the ground running as, virtual art departments to visual effects supervisors to virtual production supervisors? You were right there in the front lines. What brought this demand for retraining professionals who, were veterans of the visual effects and production industry, but also, as Tom and I experience, there are many academic institutions that are investing, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars into virtual production curriculums. How did this demand come about that, nurtured the fellowship?
Okay. Well, I see 2 primary events that kind of triggered everything. But if we backstep even just a little bit further, the previous companies were already trying to reach this kind of technology, and they had been steadily improving their tool sets. And, the studio system saw that, industry professionals saw that. And like I said, previs has been, used in a way, a new capacity to, achieve these new films and such. But what really got the ball rolling, event number 1, of course, was The Mandalorian, quite frankly, and The Lion King, and the efforts that were made for the virtual production on Lion King. And this kind of like set the industry's ear on fire and said, oh, wow, what am I hearing about this, and this, and what am I seeing, with this new tech? And so that automatically, fueled a lot of interest within the industry. And then COVID-19 hit. That's the second thing. That was the match. We had the fuel, which was The Mandalorian, and COVID-19 was the match that lit this, because all of a sudden productions across the globe were shut down. We can't get together. We can't actually, work and create new content. What can we possibly do to still continue to produce content on some form or fashion without, having a traditional film set. So a lot of people started to realize, well, hey, that LED wall solution that Favero's has churned up, that's pretty cool. And maybe we can use that as a way to continue with production. And all of a sudden there was a lot of interest by all kinds of various studios as to suddenly Unreal was like, in their minds, holding a potential solution for them. And it just opened the floodgates from the different clients, because at the time, when I was working at the LA office, I was a technical account manager. Today I'm a training program manager for the fellowship, but back then I was a technical account manager. And so that whole relationship is us interacting with clients, to help them onboard Unreal Engine into their workflows and pipelines, and act as a client advocate or a bridge to our dev team. And so, all of a sudden, all of my clients were like giving us phone calls as to, so how do we do this Mandalorian thing? How do we set this up?
It's a good question.
What can we do for this? And so it was very much we had to respond to this. And the education team was also thinking along the same lines. And there were some various pitches and ideas that came out, that kind of was, the spark for all of this. And it also tied in, with the advent of a lot of epic mega grants that were going on at the time, people trying to produce different projects. And we had all of these layoffs of people, going, losing their jobs and being placed on, just
furlough,
furlough and that kind of thing. So, Tim Sweeney also was thinking ahead and started to consider, well, this would be a great opportunity for us to start thinking about taking these people who are all on furlough, who've lost their jobs and so forth, and let's train them in Unreal Engine as a response. And so the whole fellowship was kind of like, let's pay people to learn the engine and teach them about virtual production. And it, of course, stirred a lot of interest by people, especially when we, in the beginning, said, in the beginning, we did a pilot program, and we can go and talk about that and how it was all set up and so forth. But we did a pilot program with some very senior visual effects professionals to kind of help us, with the initial phases of setting up, the curriculum and program. And we presented to them what we had come up with, and we took them through a 6-week program. And, we took their feedback, and ultimately it was what we applied to the second and third cohorts. And those needed to be upscaled because we only had 15 people and a couple of auditors that we put in the first phase of the first. And then, the execs, of course, within Epic were like, okay, that's really nice, Brian, but, we need to upscale this. You need to be able to do more people.
Yeah.
And we were thinking about doing 50. And they were like, no more.
Yeah.
So we settled on 100 people per cohort.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. It's hard, and it's a challenge to teach 100 people over Zoom.
So that's a big challenge to solve for. So 6 weeks, Tom has been working in Unreal Engine for 10 plus years. I've been working in Unreal Engine for a long time. How do you do that? You're talking about people who with Academy Awards have been working in the visual effects industry for many, many years, but now they're jumping into a significant tool set. They've got a lot to learn. Yeah. Of course, they're absolutely brilliant at what they do, but you're talking about major paradigm shifts in the way that people work. How do you approach it? Well, let's break it down a little bit. We're talking about certain tools in Unreal Engine. Sequencer, really is a game changer in Unreal Engine. Why? Because it takes a game engine that is quite frequently a nonlinear, total player agency. You can do whatever you want in there, and it brings linearity into that environment, that real time 60 frame a second, 120 frame a second, whatever frame a second. Film typically is 24 frames a second. So sequencer gives you that control to have linearity, but you have to teach a massive tool set. 6 weeks is not a lot of time, but you also have to teach lighting. You have to teach the surfacing technology inside of Unreal Engine. How did you break down 6 weeks? What was, even from the first cohort, what did you teach and how did you think about it? How did you approach that challenge?
Sure. Well, this was, basically I drew back from my experience being a previs supervisor. As a previs supervisor, we would work with directors, cinematographers, visual effects supervisors, and so forth. And our whole job as a previs team, especially on the conceptual side of doing things, was to basically help create and assemble and construct story flow for the director so that he could see his vision for a film or a sequence or whatever, and react to it, give feedback, I'd like to change this shot, etc. And, the whole advent of doing conceptual previs with a director and with an editor is a very dynamic process. It's very much give and take, back and forth, produce shots, and create a sequence that ultimately, summarizes a particular portion of the film. So that was a very rewarding experience for me as a supervisor and as a previs artist, because you get ownership of a particular thing. So I applied that mentality to the fellowship and said, okay, we could either go in and teach a bunch of individual classes, give them homework, and basically say, when you finish your homework, congratulations, you've finished the program. That's all great, well and done, but it doesn't really, give that sense of completion or achievement. So my thought was just simply, okay, I need to basically kind of treat them as a previs team and give them a task to produce their own little mini short film. So when that was done, they would have something that they could hold out and say, I made this in Unreal Engine in 6 weeks. Now, the second and third cohorts, the second cohort only had 4 weeks. And
wow.
we settled.
Less time.
We settled. Yeah, I know. Even less time. It's like, let's lower the oxygen level in the room too. Why not? We only had 4 weeks for the second cohort, and we had 5 weeks for the third cohort. I think we're going to stabilize and settle for
you're messing with everything. Program.
Yeah. So each week kind of had some very specific goals to maintain.
Can I pause for a second?
Absolutely.
So what I just heard is that everyone's expected to make a movie in Unreal Engine. Okay, so there is an outcome. Everyone's brought into the fellowship and they are going to make a movie in Unreal Engine. They're expected to leverage their experience as experienced filmmakers of one kind or another, whatever their particular role, and they're going to make a movie in 6 weeks, 4 weeks, or 5 weeks in Unreal Engine.
That's correct.
Okay.
And, for the first cohort, we had some pretty high standards as far as, we expected people who was in the first cohort to have at least 10 years of film production experience. That's a lot, And so, and we did get some really high-end people in the first cohort. We had, Oscar winners, we had, senior visual effects supervisors, we had, a bunch of, really strong people. But when we opened the door, basically to the world and opened up the application process, we wanted to make sure that, we weren't pushing the level too high, because we wanted to get more junior people involved, because we thought that was important. So we made we changed the standards of our selection criteria, and we brought it down to 5 years of production experience, and somebody who's worked on at least say maybe 3 to 5 films in their past history, or worked on episodic television, or worked and produced games. We were like, hey, if you've done 2 or 3 AAA titles, have worked on one of those, that will qualify you as well. Because whether it's film, animation, broadcast, or games, they each kind of have, a different production cycle as to how much that they produce. So, the thought was, let's try to get, more walks of life and a more diverse, group into the second and third cohorts, which we did. And when we opened up the doors, we had about 6,000 people apply, which was crazy because we had to go and sort through all of these people.
So why is that? I mean, can we give a little bit of details as to what people were offered to participate?
Absolutely. So as we mentioned, this was a way to hopefully help people who had been laid off due to COVID-19 or furloughed. The second and third cohorts were offered, $10,000 to participate per person. And, that's, right there, that's like a bit of a whoa. But, each person is paid, $10,000, and it was divided into 2 payments. They reach the midpoint, they get a payment. When they complete and finish the program, they get their second payment. And
not too shabby. You get paid to learn Unreal Engine, make a movie.
Absolutely. Yeah.
At first I was like, what? And then I saw the schedule and what they were expected to do in that time. And
it's
like,
not free money.
That's the only way to do it. We really expected,
a lot
them to dedicate quite a bit of time to this.
Yeah. They were pretty much full time.
It's a full-time job is what it is.
Absolutely.
Exactly. We actually considered it that way. It's like, we're going to pay you to learn, but we're needing you and your services to go through this program. And from our perspective, we learned a lot from it too as a company. Because we were doing surveys every week about their experience in Unreal, what was working for them. We did all this data collection, which ultimately goes back to our folks about how to make the engine better. We've sent some of their ideas, of course, to the dev teams and said, hey, we found these bugs, or these features would be very helpful to have, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, they were paid. And the schedule that went forward for this was we expected them to basically put in a full-time hours per week. So 40 hours per week minimum,
right.
8 hours a day, 5 days a week. But most people, of course, would work over the weekends too, because they wanted to continue working on their projects and so forth. But 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day. We would normally, start off an average day with coffee hour. We'd come in, all right, let's meet for coffee. This isn't mandatory, but if you want to meet in the beginning, and socialize and chat, because one of the big things about the fellowship is, generating community.
Right.
And so we would go and have coffee hour in the morning. And then after coffee hour, we would move into instruction, where they would go through a 2-hour block of instruction, on all kinds of various subjects. But each week was identified to have specific goals. So we kind of broke up each week, in relationship to how you would go through, in producing a film. So in phase, week 1, it's all about storyboarding, conceptualization, creating a, perhaps a boardomatic of some sort, anything to kind of help inform their process of their idea. And they all fellows were paired with a mentor. And what we normally do is we put about 10 people per mentor. So we'll have 10 mentors in the program, and these mentors are assigned 10 to 12 fellows, depending upon how many we have in the cohort. And this mentor is there to help guide them through the process.
What do you mean by mentor? Is that somebody from Epic? Is that somebody who's a mentor?
Normally it's somebody from Epic, or somebody that is an industry professional who's come in to be a part of this. And we've had some of our instructors too from the training team have acted as mentors. And it's
somebody
a lot
to
of
help
times,
them to understand, somebody to help them understand the technical challenges of the engine, or what they're trying to achieve as they're completing their short movies. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, the mentor is kind of like, their Sherpa, their guide, their, the person that's going to help keep them from going off the rails. Because I can tell you, these are some brilliant people who have been in this fellowship. These cohorts have included, some creative professionals that are just astounding in their portfolios and what they've produced in the past and so forth. And a lot of them have a lot of grand, big ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But as we've mentioned, we have 5 weeks. So, the mentor is basically there to say, okay, your idea, lovely, but you need to scale it back,
Right.
or you need to trim things down.
Right. Here are the riverbanks, stay within the riverbanks.
Yeah. Exactly. And it was quite common for people to come up with some really brilliant ideas, but there was no way in hell that they would be able to get it finished in time. So, what we would normally do, these mentors, we would have scrums, with them, or dailies. Sometimes, some mentors liked having short scrums every day. Other mentors like to, dedicate a big block of time to do all the scrums at once. But basically, this was, a small group dynamic where the mentor and the fellows would get together to look at works in progress, so that not only could your peers in the small group give you feedback, but also the mentor could give you feedback, from an Unreal Engine perspective, and say, you can accomplish this, you can do that, etc. I would pull this out, don't do this, don't do that, or do this or do that, depending upon. And, and then we also, at the end of the week, we would do weeklies, which was large group dynamics, where all the fellows come together, and all the mentors come together, and each mentor team of 10 would nominate about 2 people to present during weeklies, and they would give their full pitch to the entire cohort. And everybody would watch it. And actually, those weeklies were pretty cool, because it really let everybody kind of see what the works in progress were. It gave inspiration to people. Some people were like, I really don't know what to do, and they would see what these other people were thinking. And all of this was tied together, with a big, Slack workspace and multiple sets of channels that allowed them to communicate with one another. So you had questions on specific topics. We had specific channels in Slack that would talk specifically on sequencer or on lighting or this or that. We had tech support online, and we even set up virtual
machines
for people that didn't have a great workstation at home. So,
can you talk a little bit more about that? That sounds cool.
Oh, sure. We're still perfecting the process, but we basically partnered with, I believe we were using, the whole Google system, the Google machines, that they would spin up full-fledged workstations for us virtually, and folks would download the Teradici software, to interface with this, and they could log in. We had to get specific information from the fellows as far as where they were located, so that we could get them in best appropriately situated to whatever cluster or large metropolitan area to route their particular signals to, so in their communication, so that they had a really strong connection to their virtual machines. But these virtual machines would be spun up, very powerful, lots of memory, nice graphics cards and everything else, and they would log into them and use them as actual desktop replacements, and they would operate entirely on the virtual machine in the cloud on
awesome.
Google. So it was really sweet.
Completely possible, completely doable with Unreal Engine. So you can use your mouse and keyboard and your monitor, but basically you're using CPU, GPU, and RAM from some crazy, super powerful machine on the cloud, and doing all your processes.
And it works.
It works. It definitely works.
I've used them, and I've actually ended up forgetting that I was using a virtual machine until I was like trying to find something on my local C drive, and I'm like, "Where's all my? Oh, this isn't my drive. This is some computer that's a couple 100 miles away." And the Teradici and the powerful computers that you can print now, it's remarkable how well it worked. I really had fairly low expectations because I've done a lot of VM work and tried to use Unreal over VMs many times, and any sort of latency makes that using those little widgets in the interface and everything so difficult, and it really works.
So
it's remarkably
there are
reliable.
questions about the cost of such a thing. It can be very expensive if you're trying to do one-offs of that sort of thing. But of course, if you have a company you can reduce the cost of that if you are, purchasing blocks of time. So just be aware that those things can be negotiated with both Google and Amazon and Microsoft based on, purchasing clusters of servers.
Yeah, it worked very well. I would say it would probably give you about 95 to 98% performance of having an actual live machine at your desk. The only limitation for some of the fellows in the program was, potentially on their side, low bandwidth, people that had, poor internet connections, or, maybe, just slow bandwidth, and that can, slow that connection down. But, if you have fast connection onto the internet, a virtual machine is a very practical solution. It works pretty well.
What's it? It's like if you can stream Netflix, you can pretty much use a virtual machine. Is that appropriate?
Generally, yes. But I mean, still, if you've got like only, a 10 megabit per second line, you're gonna struggle.
But
I mean, you can
stream Netflix and run a virtual
tell your
machine.
kids to get offline. Stop hogging my bandwidth. But
so
nowadays you can get it.
Let me jump back into what else. So you provided the fellows instruction, you provided them a mentor, but you guys also had professionals coming in and giving lectures on a regular basis.
We did. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Of course. Not only, just to sum up, the mentors. I've got to also remember our TAs, our technical artists. They were instrumental in this whole process. Mentors, they have a lot of experience, but they're dealing with lots of people, and they're trying to basically help these people get through the program. And a lot of times, people would have very specific, heavy-duty technical questions, and hopefully, the mentor is able to answer them for them. But if they're outside of the mentor's expertise range, because some mentors came in and they were like, "Hey, I'm an animation specialist." Others came in and said, "Oh, I do previs." Others, "Well, I do lighting. I'm a lighting artist," or I do this or do that.
And you had Houdini specialists, and you had compositing specialists, and you had other wildly different disciplines coming into as fellows.
Yeah. So, a lot of times some of the questions that the fellows would ask would be outside of the range of the mentor's expertise. And that wasn't a bad thing. We would basically said, "Hey, look, this is a community. We have multiple mentors here. We can potentially find a way to answer these people's questions." And that's where a lot of times the technical artists who came in to help us, we couldn't live without them. So we had 10 TAs in the last cohort who are all really high-skilled technical specialists that basically monitored Slack for us 24/7, pretty close. And any questions that would come up, the TAs would jump on it and say, "Okay, yes, we can help you, dissect this blueprint," or whatever was needed in order to help them if a mentor wasn't present, or like I said, if it was outside the mentor's expertise range. So we had them. And then we also had, our guest speakers come in. So we had a number of industry speakers come in who've been working in the field in virtual production. We had some folks come in and talk from Fox VFX Labs when they were open and, a major player. They're now, unfortunately, no longer an active studio, but that all changed when the whole Disney acquired Fox thing. But yeah, well, that's details. But, we had other speakers come in from, various people from the various previous companies who came in and spoke. We had, other production specialists, cinematographers, lighting experts, production designers, people in the animation industry, all kinds came in. And that was, so, when we go back to the whole curriculum, coffee hour, classes, and then in the afternoon, we would do either, Scrum session or a live lab where basically mentors, TAs, and instructors would come in and basically help you live diagnose your questions or problems. Or there might be a guest speaker who would come in and talk. We also had, our folks from the special projects team. They also came in and gave very distinct, specific classes and talks on, Epic's own pipeline, for creating the Fortnite shorts and that kind of thing. And, between all of these things, the weeklies, the dailies, all of it, it creates this synergy of, camaraderie and, the ability to answer all these questions and these specialists coming in and talking to you. And, it's really, really exciting from a participant's perspective. And, that's kind of the glue that really kind of makes this fellowship. The fellowship is the whole, you are being shepherded through 5 weeks of training, and you've got basically a support staff at your back.
Crazy.
Saying, okay, you're going to create this film, you're going to make it, and let's walk you through it.
Now, all the films are different, right? So
they are.
That's the other thing, is that not everyone's making the same movie. They're being very creative, and so that everyone's challenge is going to be somewhat different in the way they're approaching what they're doing. And so what's being asked of the mentors, what's being asked of the TAs, everyone's going to have a different problem, a challenge.
That's true.
And so that's one thing. What was provided to the fellows? Did they have to make their own models? Did they have to build their own worlds? What did you provide them?
We, we gave this a lot of thought. In the pilot program, we basically, opened the floodgates of Epic's marketplace and allowed them to pick anything that they wanted out of that.
I want that.
But, we found that was a very confusing process, both for the fellows and trying to get that all approved and so forth. And when you're dealing with 100 people in the cohort, doing that was just kind of like, my goodness. So, we did provide them with a human character, Echo, basically, which is, the female character from the UE5 promotional videos. Mm-hmm. So we took Echo out of UE5 and its development, and basically retrofitted her down to 425 and put an art rig on her from the animation and rigging toolkit, so that we could have her inside of Maya and be inside of Unreal Engine. And she was fully equipped. She had blend face, blend shapes on her face, so that she would be compatible with doing facial capture. She had an animation rig in Maya so that she could be animated. And she was fully textured and prepped in Unreal so that she could accept motion capture data. And so that character, was instrumental for a lot of people's short films. They used her as the central figure, a central protagonist in their story, or whatever they wanted to use her for. Other people, though, weren't satisfied with that. Some of them are like, I want more, and they would since they were being paid, a lot of them actually went into the marketplace and still made some purchases of their own, of specific things that they wanted. So some of them would purchase either existing environments or additional characters, or use any of the free materials that are on the marketplace, because there's always a lot of those that come up. And so a lot of them, would use, free mocap data, anything that was, that would work for SK Mannequin would also work and apply to Echo once you retargeted, because her skeleton was compatible, of course, with SK Mannequins. And we even had some individuals who had their own characters, that some of them who were skilled riggers or people that, could set up something in Maya of their own, they did. And, you can't underestimate these folks, because a lot of them are professionals in industry themselves, and they have a lot of skills. And they're like, once they start being shown specifically how some of this works, suddenly they start making the connections. Oh, well, I can do this and I can do that. And we don't want to discourage that in any way, but we just want to be careful, with that. It's like, yes, you can go ahead and do that if you think you can manage it, but remember, you have a film to produce. And so, we've given you Echo, we've given you some environments, we pre-built some environments, kind of like a sci-fi environment and a fantasy environment and that kind of thing, and some people used them, some people did not. A lot of people, used environments inside of the marketplace. And then in the last cohort, we really started getting into Quixel. And that's where we started saying, hey, use these, because now you're going to have some really photographic, professional looking assets. Not that the ones on the marketplace weren't, but they weren't generally photorealistic or photorealism. And a lot of people wanted that too. So they started using and learning how to use Quixel. And so some of them created custom, environments using those models. And, it really turned out amazing, and we should really we should look at something.
Are you ready? Yeah. What do you want to do?
Let's start off. Start off with something really strong. Let's show Jeff Liu's Pulsar.
All right, Jeff Liu's Pulsar, jumping right in.
This kind of uses it all. It kind of is. And we'll talk about him once it's done, but it used everything,
This is it. I found one. So beautiful. So powerful. Now, we have a chance.
No, 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 no. It's too late.
That was crazy.
That was awesome. That's amazing.
Now, to Jeff's credit, and everybody should realize that Jeff has a history of creating some really cool shorts. Some of you may know Jeff Liu's work in the past. He produced all of the Killer Bean shorts. I don't know if you know that or know about those, but if you know about the Killer Bean shorts, that's Jeff Liu, and he's the guy who came in, to the program.
That's a man who knows action.
You bet. But what was really fun about this particular project is that Jeff, he really understood the pipeline well. So, I mean, he had a big advantage, I'm going to say flat out, but he had never touched Unreal. He had not used it at all. And that is like, okay, this is quite, quite amazing. What did you do? And how did you get all of this integration of everything? And if I recall correctly, in talking with Jeff, he was like, well, first off, I planned it out, obviously mapped everything out from a story perspective. And he actually went out and hired voice talent off of Fiverr, and hired a woman to read all the lines and do all the action. So, he got her to do, record all of that. And he also set up and used the animation rig inside of Maya to do a lot of the individual animations, the custom ones. And he took advantage, I'm sure, of also some of the mocap that we provided. And not only did we supply basic mocap, we actually provided within the cohort, we do a mocap session and demonstration as part of the program. And this was what was super cool, because it was all multi-user remote, in the sense that we had a mocap actor on the West Coast. We had an Unreal operator over on the East Coast in Cary, and we had the fellows wherever they were in the world, watching all of this on Zoom, directing the whole motion capture session. So they were like, okay, I want you to move from this point to this point, run, jump, do this, do that. And they would, make these requests for potential things that they wanted to capture. And then we would use our mocap team to capture the data, record it, and we would provide them with an FBX file, the next day.
Wow. On XN suits? Is that what you were using?
Using XN suits, that's correct. So, Jeff, of course, he used some of that mocap data. He's also a very skilled and trained animator. So he went and animated portions in Maya, exported those out as an FBX for import into the engine. And, he put and constructed all of this, in engine. And he was, it was one of the most polished pieces that I think the fellowship has produced.
That was from cohort 3, right?
He was in, let me see here. He was in cohort 2. He was in summer 2020, not fall.
Oh, great. All right, let's keep going. That was fun.
Oh, okay. Let's go ahead and move to something even more story based, and let's go with the Miguel Ortega, Miguel and Tran. It's a summer 2020.
All right.
This one is the Vision.
Miguel Ortega, you ready?
Yep.
We shouldn't be here, Danua. It's forbidden. So go back. I'll find the treasure myself. But what if it's really cursed? It's not. They just say that to scare us. Dakota was right. The earthquake unset the entrance. We can get in. What if the conquistadors are still in there? Don't be dim, Taza. That was hundreds of years ago. They'd be dead. I don't want to see a dead person. We won't see one. There'd be 7. Damn it. See? There's nothing to worry about. No! No. I'll find us a way out.
This particular piece, gave me goosebumps when I saw it, in the sense of its potential. Now, this was one of the only teams in the fellowship that actually was a team. There were two people on this particular project, Tran and Miguel. They've been working together for their entire careers, and they really wanted to be able to do this project in concert. So we agreed to allow them to do that. Normally we want each person to do their own individual film, but we decided to make an exemption for them, and we allowed them to proceed forward. And this is what they produced, and it was, again, a very solid example of what two people can produce. And for them, as since they were in the second cohort, they did this in 4 weeks, and they went and basically retrofitted Kite Boy and turned him into a new character. Both of those characters that you see in that film, the two kids, they're both Kite Boy, but they were remodified, and they took them out of the engine, remodified their base geometry, applied all new face shapes and blend shapes to them.
Wow.
And put them back into the engine as totally new characters.
That's a lot of work.
So yeah, it's definitely a lot of work. But the result was they had two children that they could use. They had, I believe that the zombie characters, they might have, gotten something like them off of the marketplace. I can't remember, but this particular piece, they are doing lots, with it. I believe they actually presented this piece to as an official pitch to a number of different, studios, and it's actually gaining some traction. And that's really, nice to hear.
So we might get to see what happens.
We might. We might.
I mean, the thing that struck me watching that was that it was the total package. There was cinematography, lighting, acting, environment, music and sound, and how it all came to editing. Like you said, it's like there's the whole thing right there, and all at once, and it's amazing that could come together in that time period. Plus learning the tool.
Yeah.
It really speaks volumes to the dedication of the fellows who joined this program.
Oh, and not only their efforts, of course, but this is all happening, and the mentor that's guiding them through this process is supplying input for them. But then, like I said, all the other fellows and TAs are also chiming in, and so if they had specific questions, they could raise them up, and they could be answered by other folks in the program, so forth. But these are two examples, obviously, of very professional, experienced people who have come in and used the engine, were retrained, and created this in this this short period of time. Now, not everybody that comes into the program has had as much experience as these two individuals, Jeff Liu and Tran and Miguel. Some people come in and they haven't worked on anything before, in that sense, or they may have been a producer or something like that, and there were some people that were able to create some really nice projects. And we had, in the third cohort, we started to expand out into the other different countries and regions, and we had a lot of folks from India that came in the third cohort, and they were, of course, a lot of interest over in India for using Unreal Engine. And there's one person that I should call out, and that would be Vani. Vani Balgam is listed here, and she she actually worked for Rhythm and Hues over in India, but she wasn't really on the box. She was she helped run the studio over there, And she's had a lot of experience in being exposed to these type of technologies. And she had created some short film because her father was an animator before her. And so, she really wanted to be in the program, but originally she was kind of like, well, there are other people that really should be before me. But we saw her work and we said, no, you've got to come into this program, and we really want to see you learn the engine. So she had absolutely no experience in the engine at all. And, she wanted to create a music video to, and basically tell her story, which was really fun. And so she produced something that is all about, empowerment and, being able to control your own destiny in many ways. And, we should take a look at hers.
I'm ready.
Fire away.
Question I ask daily, am I the one in my way? Well, maybe nothing feels real to me anymore lately. I just wanna break this loop and stop feeling crazy. इस दुनिया से क्या पाया जो दे दूं उसको मैं इतनी ताकत, खुद के जीवन के डोर को खुद के हाथ में ले लूं वापस, बदलूं हर एक को आदत कर दे मुझे जो नाजुक, अपनी खुशियों की मैं तो खुद ही हूँ एक ही अब मालिक। आदत से मजबूर हूँ काफी, चलते ही दिख जाए मंजिल, जीत से कर लूं मैं हासिल। जीत हासिल, जीत हासिल, जीत हासिल।
असतोमा सतगमय तमसोमा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा मृदंगमय मृत्योर्मा मृदंगमय।
दास्तां ये आसान लगे ज्यादा ये फासला, अब ना मुझे हारना, दे दो खुद का साथ, हाँ सब कुछ मुझे जानना, सब कुछ है पहचानना, दिल का जो भी मामला उसको है सुलझाना।
था डर उसे मिटा दिया अब, बढ़ने की सिर्फ एक चाहत, अब जैसे जीतने की आदत, आसमां में उड़ने की ख्वाहिश, देख कैसे चल दूं मैं आगे, मुझे देख के दुनिया भी भागे, सपनों से भर दूं मैं आंखें, खुल के ही कर लूं मैं बातें। Story of my life, I decide who I'm gonna be, I took control over my mind, now I'm feeling free, all the anxiety and fears, yeah they're clearing up, gave me the strength to realize, now I know what's up। जीत से कर लूं मैं हासिल, 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 जीत से हासिल, जीत से
Cool.
Yeah, it was really fun. And if I recall right, she did all the singing for it too. So she was, very, very versatile in, her talents, and not only, thinking up this whole music video, going out and writing all the lyrics for it and singing it. And then, creating this whole music video around it. And, she did it with the assets that we provided. All of the the set pieces are from marketplace assets, and when she came through the program and finished, she was just like beaming, and it was so cool for me to see because as kind of like the master mentor for this program, I get a big kick out of seeing people go from not knowing to completely expressing themselves, and it's just like, this is just awesome, and I was really pleased with it. She did a great job.
What was her name again?
Everybody calls her Vanny, Vani. I can't really truly pronounce her first name, but and the last name is Balgam, I believe. But everybody knows her as Vanny.
That was so cool.
And there's more.
Yeah, let's
there's
keep
definitely
rolling.
More. Okay. I'd like to look at Damien's piece here called Nomad, and this is another one of my favorites. That from a technical perspective, it looks beautiful. It was really well rendered, fully ray traced, and it's pretty exceptional.
Damien Kwiatkowski?
Yeah.
Okay.
Another difficult name to pronounce, but
all right, here we go.
I really like this piece. I think it was beautifully done. It looks gorgeous. It's got that nice vibe going to it. The music was nice. Rendered really well. It looked looked really good.
Holy camole, yeah. That was amazing. Beautiful.
Yeah, it was interesting, in the process of creating this, he was a little bit behind because he was really trying to, get the right look. But, he pulled it through in the end, and it came out beautifully, I thought.
That was called Nomad by Damien.
That's correct. Yes.
Kwiatkowski.
Kwiatkowski. I guess maybe. But speaking of rendering, want to show one more?
Yes, the other space one. That one we got to show too.
I want to show Crash.
Crash. I don't have the name. I've got the name of the person, but I don't know.
It's Arnold Aldridge. A. Aldridge.
A. Aldridge. A. Aldridge. Yeah, I got it.
whatever he saw, we can't just ignore that.
How do you know he ever saw anything? Do you have any proof?
Disengage propulsion.
Already on my way. Propulsion throttle down.
Copy.
I mean, don't you think if anyone were to actually know about aliens, we'd be the ones?
Yeah. Countdown 3 minutes to landing.
Landing gears locked and loaded.
Houston, trajectory is nominal. Prepare for entry burn.
Engine 4 liquid oxygen load is way below threshold. Thrust is 5,000 pounds and dropping.
God damn it, that was engine 4. Shut down engine 4.
I'm ready to pressurize.
Diverting in 3, 2, 1.
Of ray tracing capabilities and the whole doing this practically as a oneer for the whole camera move is really a challenge. And it's interesting too, he used a technique to kind of like provide live feeds in the dashboard monitor of the capsule. All of those video feeds that you were seeing on the screens, they were basically, cameras positioned outside of the module that were feeding film data or, what they were recording and putting it onto a texture map on site, inside of the module, so that you could kind of see live what was happening on those screens. So that was, really nicely done. And, the ray tracing quality of it was really beautiful. It was a fun piece. Action packed in the sense of, after the explosion, it's just, again, it rates up there as a really nicely done short.
I mean, for 5 weeks.
Yeah. All of these for 5 months. Is someone in the chat said that gave me anxiety, and I was thinking the exact same thing. It was just like, wow, that just combined a whole bunch of my fears all in one. Spinning out in space, alien. It just wrapped it all up together. It was nice.
Yes. That's what we want to do, is instill a little fear in everybody about, but
it's effective, right? That's what it was trying to achieve. And like you said, the shot choices and stuff. So interesting. And I wonder if, to rely on reflection on such a high level, if you don't have that immediate feedback of real-time ray tracing, how hard would that be to set shots, in traditional ray tracing, waiting, even a couple of minutes for a preview frame? That would be so difficult to achieve that.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I mean, we can keep going, or if there's more things that we want to ask. I mean, otherwise we can show another film that's maybe a little more peaceful, if you'd like. Something that isn't quite so crazy.
There's one that I think is really the one with the monster with the particle system, the lava monster. Which ones do you have?
Yes.
Do we have the lava monster? We got to show the lava monster.
Yes, we do. That one is the one that's labeled X Martin and Xavier Martin.
X Martin. All right, we got to show that one. It's really cool.
This is a really technical tour de force as well. This one was a lot of fluid simulation in Houdini, and it was brought into Unreal Engine via Alembic caching. So this one is impressive from a technical point of view, but we should expect that from a man who's working at ILM. So this is another one that's just like, holy cow, how did you do this in 4 weeks? Because he was in the summer fellowship and had the shorter time period.
Yeah.
So,
cool. All right.
fire it up, fire it up.
That is madness. I mean, that quality of particles in Unreal Engine is madness. I mean, of course, it's a material, but
well, still, it was all initially done in, at least from the particle simulation, was done in Houdini, and as mentioned, cached out, exported out as an Alembic cache, and that was all brought into Unreal Engine, and then he worked through and created an excellent lava shader, or maybe he acquired one. I'd have to ask him, and put it together in a nice, effective way, suspenseful way, showing this creature chasing after Echo, and even the shot where she's running and your foot hits the.
I know, that was gorgeous.
Yeah, and the splash up of the water and everything else like that. That too, of course, was a Houdini, simulation. But it was astounding, because when I first saw it, I was just like, no way, how? How did you do this so quickly? And again, having a mastery of Houdini is where it was at for him, because he been doing a lot of particle work in the past, and so his abilities and skills to produce that kind of look and liquid was already with him. But
so I think it'd be valuable for us to talk a little bit about what's coming in the future of the fellowship. But before we get into that, maybe we should just point out that even without $10,000 and mentors from Epic, you can all learn this stuff, right? I mean, it helps to have $10,000 in mentors from Epic, but a lot of the material is available. And you guys used mostly training material that's available to everyone for the most part. Would that be fair to say?
Now, like mentioned, there were a lot of people that went outside of the system, in the sense of they did their own thing and created their own stuff. And that's all fine. But for the vast majority of the people who completed the fellowship, they either used the assets that we provided them or assets on the marketplace, typically. And a lot of them, of those assets, were either coming from training projects. Some of them were repurposed assets from other Epic productions. Like I said, Kite Boy was used, and people repurposed Kite Boy. And there were, some people that, completely, created their own environments in their own, in their own way, whether they modeled something or not. But yes, everything that was created, for the fellowship, most of it was using procured assets. Either some people actually use some TurboSquid models as well, properly licensed, and reutilize those, turn them into compatible for the engine. There's other examples that I can show you if we watch more later on. We'll watch another block of films. we'll show you some more of the ones that, pretty much used only assets from the marketplace and, their own effort. But yes, pretty much any, I attest and say, yes, if you come into the fellowship program, you will leave the program creating something, some sort of short film.
Before we go forward and talk a little bit now, people can go and look at these movies on Vimeo. Is that right? Is this publicly available to everyone?
It is.
They can go?
Yep. Both the summer and the fall fellowships are on Vimeo.
So they can just do a search for Unreal Fellowship, and they can find them on Vimeo as publicly available videos.
Yes, I mean, we can potentially supply links to the showcases.
I have a link. Necessary. Is it all right to post the link?
I
have
no
one of the links to the fall one anyway. So let me
okay.
Put the
let me get you the summer one.
There's the fall. 96 videos, so that's pretty good. 4 people.
Yeah, that'll keep you busy. And here is the summer. I will send it to you in Slack so you can post it to everybody.
Okay.
There you go. That's the summer. So you can post that out.
Cool.
There's about another 96, 97 videos in that. So you'll have plenty to watch.
Yes. So we got about, a little less than 15 minutes left. What do you want to share with folks about, the future of the fellowship?
Future of the fellowship. Well, let me look at my slides here. Well, as mentioned, we think of the fellowship as occurring in phases. And what you saw was the result of a phase 1 fellowship that focuses on teaching Unreal Engine fundamentals, linear content creation and sequencing, and animation content. All of this we feel is a foundational education of using Unreal Engine, but we have other ideas for phase 2 and for phase 3. Phase 2 is where we start adding live action integration, live video streams, cameras, camera tracking, more mocap, facial capture, all that kind of thing, LED walls. And hopefully our intent for that is we're betting on that eventually COVID is going to be handled, vaccines and all that kind of stuff, and we can get back into being in presence with one another. But a lot of this in the live action integration fellowship, phase 2, requires you to be physically present, to see how these things are set up, to actually have your hands on a camera, to actually be in a volume, do all those kind of thing. And ultimately we're going to work very hard to provide or try to find a solution for that. And we are, there's a couple things that are going on with the LA lab. Unfortunately, right now I can't discuss them, but our hope for them is to have a place where students will be able to go in order to receive this hands-on training. So the phase 2 fellowship will be a combination of both virtually presented classes like we did in the phase 1 fellowship, because there's still a lot of stuff that can be taught fully virtually. And then there'll be a lab portion of that fellowship, probably most likely in Los Angeles, where people will come to be able to have that hands-on experience. And then, phase 3 of the fellowship is what I'm calling collaborative filmmaking. And that's where really we kind of try to pull it all together, where we have, defined roles, working in multi-user modes of Unreal to, create a really showcase piece. But, we're also going to be, trying to expand the fellowship more more geos around the world so that people can have access to it. We want to try and bundle this knowledge and package it in such a way that we can start to allow other training partners to deploy fellowship type programs within their own regions. And not only that, ultimately we'd like to prepare and create something from a fully academic educational perspective that we can give to schools and other type of training partners and so forth. And this is a very important thing for us. But that's why we're kind of like doing these initial fellowships. They're fun, they're exciting, but they also have a secondary purpose, and that is to kind of supply materials for further programs down the road.
That makes sense.
And we're also doing things that we call FACE events, fellowship alumni career events, for all of the graduates. And this is basically where, we have, that question about, well, where do we find the talent? Well, that's just it. The fellowship program is there to kind of like start making the talent, retraining the talent. And there's a lot of companies out there that are like, hey, we need to hire people. How can we find people to hire? So our FACE events basically pair companies with our alumni, and we say, okay, hey, XYZ company is going to come in and give a presentation to the fellows about their company, their culture, the jobs that they have available. And we basically put the two groups together and facilitate that interaction. And then that company can say, hey, if you're interested in these jobs, we have these Unreal Engine jobs available, please apply. So the FACE events are good. We're doing other types of lecture series that we're planning, and more, everything that, every fellow goes through. Everybody's filling out these surveys that we read so that we can try to refine the program to make it better and better. All of these programs take a little time to evolve, and graduate themselves into something even better, and hopefully, that's being seen with each fellowship getting better and better and better. So there's a lot, that we'd like to be able to, continue to do for people, and continue fostering this community. That's the big thing. You get into the fellowship in the Slack sites and the workspaces, and the folks and the people that we talk to. It's a very friendly group. And for those graduates, they're able to interact with one another still. We created a set of alumni channel, and so they're all starting to kind of like form all their connections inside of all of the fellowships now, V1, V2, and V3, and soon V4, because we're going to have more fellowships this year. We're shooting for at least 4, 1 a quarter, or we're going to try.
So if someone wants more information, do they go to Unreal Engine and
yes,
go to the fellowship?
There is a web page within our site that talks about the fellowship, and it has down at the bottom kind of like, if you're interested, fill out this form. And we still have quite a few people that we're kind of processing through that, in that initial application, where we got 6,000 people. There's still people that we could potentially draw out of that group, to bring them in for later fellowships. But I would expect most likely that there will be another application process, another door opening to kind of refresh all of that, because things and circumstances have changed. People are getting employed. Some are still on furloughed, and we want to kind of see who's interested still. I'm sure hopefully it'll be another madhouse trying to process through all of those applications again. But it's worth it. It really is.
So is there anything that anyone can do to sort of make themselves more prepared, or to help stack the deck in their favor?
Well, if you're going to apply, and when the application process does open back up, one of the things that we saw that was a problem is, we had a lot of people fill out the application forms, not in English, which made it, it's like very difficult for us to read Mandarin or other types of languages. So that was a source of some problems. making sure that you have a solid resume and an online portfolio that we can look at, an IMDb page, a LinkedIn page, all of that is critical as we go through and we look through it all. And the selection criteria, the rubric that we created is very fair. And there is a subcommittee basically that elects and chooses who goes into the program. And some of them have been people that have been referred by some of the professionals within inside of our own company. Others have been people that have been referred by graduates of the program. Other people are just people who've applied, and we've chosen them out of 6,000. And some of these people that were completely chosen based off of how they submitted and their portfolios. They were some of the ones that produced some of the most fantastic works. Everybody did great, but it's just it just goes to show you that there's so much talent around the world, and so much that they can do, especially when they get a tool like this and they get the support that they need to create a short film. Most people, God, I remember when I was first starting in the industry and I was just like, oh, I want to create an animated short film, or I want to do something like this. And the whole prospect of that process really was like thousands of dollars, in order to get that done, and months worth of time, to potentially animate and create something and put it all together. When I look at some of these short films that have been created by some of the fellows, and the fact that they did them in 4, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, it just astounds me that what they've accomplished, what they've been able to accomplish.
Absolutely, these are impressive films. Especially, it's hard to build a car while you're driving it, or drive the car while you're building it, and that's what these people are doing it.
They are, big kudos to them. But again, it's because they're so jazzed, they're so energized, and then they get in to the community and they have this whole support infrastructure. And it's not just, the TAs and mentors, it's the whole administrative staff too, because we have a whole administrative group. Linda Selheim is kind of like the administrative lead for all of this. And her team, Rebecca Perry and Eddie Perlberg and a number of others who are running, getting everything up on the LMS and helping make sure people get paid and all that kind of thing. We have this whole backbone infrastructure of administrative personnel that are trying to get and help all that stuff get resolved as well. So they're instrumental. The mentors are instrumental. The TAs are instrumental. And this just all basically comes to the individual, the fellow, and says, okay, you're going to learn and we're going to push you. And it's not going to be easy. But I guarantee you that when you're done and you produce something and you have that short film in your hand, you'll have, a certain amount of pride of what you've accomplished, and I think it just simply, it shows in a lot of the work. And I can't wait to see what the 4th class produces. There's a lot of interest. I'm waiting to see, who's all going to be in this program. And we're going to have some new mentors coming in, and some new TAs. So we kind of keep that fresh, recycle some folks and get some new people in there. And all of them are bringing their knowledge to bear and to help the next set of fellows. So it should be good.
Well, I want to thank you, Brian, for joining us in today's stream. I think that this was incredibly informative, and hopefully you all enjoyed sort of watching these films and hearing about the fellowship, and getting to dig into how it came together and what the fellows learn and the outcomes of their film. It was really great to sort of see it come together, Brian, and thank you for the work that you've done to build it. And I'm sure that everyone, all the fellows that are here on the stream, really thank you for all the efforts that you put together. I know that you've had a lot of sleepless, tireless nights doing it.
It's worth it. It's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. And well, let me turn that back on and say thank you, for what you guys are doing. This live broadcast and this stream is, I think, really critical to getting the word out and, to helping people with their needs of getting this information. I think that it's this type of stuff that's essential, to help the community form and to get the information out there. So, thank you for being able to produce these broadcasts and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Thank you, Tom, as usual, for co-hosting
Absolutely.
today's stream. And we hope that you all come back and join us next Tuesday. Be aware that our stream has shifted from Fridays to Tuesdays, these educator live streams. Make sure you tune in on Thursday for Victor's Inside Unreal. And please stay safe and keep learning Unreal and using it. The demand has never been higher. And with that, we will bid you a fair good day and continue to stay safe. And thank you all for watching.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.